The storm had already taken the mountain. Wind tore through the forest like a living predator, burying the trails beneath walls of ice and snow. Lyra stumbled through the white darkness, her frozen legs barely holding her upright, while the tiny wolf pup in her arms whimpered weakly against her chest, its small heartbeat fading with every step she forced herself to take. 10 wolves had already escaped the collapsing ravine because she refused to abandon them. 10. Yet the mountain now held only one witness to her sacrifice, the girl who stayed behind while the others ran. No pack, no rescue, only the storm that slowly closed around her like a grave. The pup shivered violently in her arms. Lyra tightened her frozen fingers around the small body and pressed it closer to her heart. "I promised you I'd get you home," she whispered through chattering teeth. Far beyond the frozen valley, deep within the territories feared by every pack in the north, the Alpha King suddenly stopped walking. Kyle's golden eyes lifted toward the storm-choked mountains. A scent had just reached him through the wind. Soft, fragile, impossible, the scent of his mate, and she was dying. The savage Alpha who had broken rival packs and ruled the northern territories with iron dominance stood completely still for a single breath. Then his wolf erupted beneath his skin. "Find her," he growled to the night, because every instinct inside him screamed one truth. If the storm claimed that girl, the mountain would burn for it. Chapter 1. The Alpha King's Claim. The wolves of the Northern Kingdom had never seen Alpha King Kyle Draven hesitate before a storm. Yet when he stepped into the clearing, the raging wind seemed to recoil from him. His massive wolf form advanced through swirling snow, warriors trailing behind him in tense silence. The trail they followed told an impossible story. Injured wolves had returned to the territory hours earlier. Each one claimed a human girl carried them through the blizzard. Kyle expected fear-driven exaggeration. No human could survive a storm like this while saving wolves. But the scent in the clearing said otherwise. Blood, sacrifice, human determination, and something deeper. Kyle's wolf stirred violently beneath his skin. The scent of the human girl lingered everywhere in the clearing, tangled with the fading trails of the wolves she had carried through the storm. It was fresh, powerful, impossible to ignore. But she was not here. Kyle's golden gaze swept the clearing again, sharper this time. The snow held the story of what had happened. Small human footprints, dozens of them. They staggered across the clearing, weaving between deeper wolf tracks. Some prints were nearly buried beneath drifting snow, while others sank deeper as if the girl had been carrying weight. Carrying wolves. Even his hardened warriors shifted uneasily as they studied the ground. No human could have survived this long in a storm like this. Yet she had. Kyle crouched and pressed his hand into the snow where the deepest prints ended. The scent there was stronger. His wolf surged forward inside his chest. "Mine!" The word thundered through his mind with primal certainty. "Mate!" Kyle froze. For centuries he had ruled without believing fate would grant him such a bond. Yet the scent flooding his senses now was unmistakable. His mate had been here, and she was still somewhere inside the storm. Kyle rose slowly, his aura expanding across the clearing like a silent command. The wolves behind him instinctively lowered their heads beneath the weight of their king's dominance. "Track her," Kyle ordered. Kyle turned toward the distant cliffs where the blizzard swallowed the world in white. "Move," he commanded. The Alpha King stepped forward into the storm, and this time he ran straight toward the ravine. Chapter 2. The Alpha Who Arrived Too Late. The storm had already swallowed the valley when the Alpha King arrived. Wind howled across the frozen forest, bending ancient pines until their branches cracked like bones under pressure. Alpha Kyle Draven stood at the edge of the ravine, his breath steaming in the air as his wolf growled restlessly beneath his skin. Something was wrong, something powerful, something ancient, and something dying. The scent hit him first, faint, fragile, almost lost beneath the iron smell of snow and blood. Kyle froze, His entire body locked as the world narrowed to that single scent drifting through the storm. His wolf exploded inside his chest. Mine. The word tore through his mind with primal violence. Mate. The realization struck him like lightning. Kyle had lived for centuries without believing fate would ever grant him a bond, and now his mate was somewhere in this frozen wasteland, fading. Rage ignited instantly. His aura surged across the valley like a shock wave. Nearby wolves dropped their heads instinctively, trembling beneath the sheer pressure of their king's dominance. Kyle didn't care. His gaze swept the ravine until he saw the collapsed shelter, half buried under snow. 10 wolves huddled inside, weak, exhausted, alive. But the scent of his mate came from somewhere beyond them. Kyle stepped forward slowly. The rescued wolves immediately bowed low, fear and reverence flashing across their faces. One of them spoke with a shaking voice. "Alpha King, we tried to stop her." Kyle's eyes darkened. "Stop her? What do you mean?" Another wolf swallowed hard. She kept going back into the storm. For the pup." Kyle's chest tightened. "Where?" The word came out like thunder. The wolves pointed toward the frozen ridge above the ravine. She never came back. For a moment, the world went silent. Then Kyle ran. The Alpha King moved like a shadow tearing through the storm. Snow exploded beneath his boots as his wolf pushed harder and harder toward the fading scent. "Mate, mate, mate!" His instincts screamed louder with every step. Then he saw her. A small shape collapsed against the frozen ground near the ridge, her body half buried in snow, her arms wrapped protectively around something tiny. Kyle's heart stopped. He dropped to his knees beside her. The pup inside her arms whined softly. Alive, barely, but alive. Kyle gently lifted the pup away and wrapped it inside his cloak before turning back to the woman who had saved it. For the first time he truly saw her. Her lips were pale blue. Ice clung to her lashes. Her fingers were frozen stiff where they had shielded the pup from the wind. Kyle's chest tightened painfully. His mate, his wolf, howled in agony. How long had she been here? How much had she suffered? He pulled her carefully into his arms. Her body was frighteningly cold. Too cold. "Stay with me," he growled softly. His voice trembled despite his power. He pressed his forehead to hers, and that's when something impossible happened. The moment their skin touched, a surge of ancient power ignited between them. Kyle's eyes widened. The frozen air around them vibrated. His mate gasped weakly. Her eyelids fluttered open, and glowing silver light burned faintly beneath her skin. Kyle froze, because only one bloodline carried that power, the lost lineage of the Moon Queen, which meant the woman dying in his arms was not just his mate. She was the most powerful wolf alive, and someone had tried to erase her existence. Then she whispered something barely audible, one fragile word. "Run." Kyle's entire body went rigid, because suddenly the forest around them went silent, and hundreds of hostile wolf scents flooded the valley. They had followed him, and they wanted his mate. Chapter 3. The pack that came for her. The forest went silent. Snow still fell, yet the valley suddenly felt crowded with unseen predators. Kyle's wolf rose violently inside him. He could smell them now. Too many. Dozens of wolves circling the ridge through the storm. His jaw tightened. They were not rogues, they were pack wolves, which meant someone powerful had sent them. Kyle pulled his cloak tighter around the trembling pup before lifting the frozen woman into his arms. Her head fell weakly against his chest. Cold. Far too cold. Yet beneath that deadly stillness, her faint scent wrapped around his senses like fragile moonlight. Mate. His wolf refused to release the word. Kyle pressed his hand gently against her back. A faint pulse of silver warmth flickered beneath her skin. Moon Queen blood. The lost lineage. The bloodline that vanished centuries ago after the Great Pack War. His chest tightened with realization. If the Valley Packs discovered who she truly was, they would tear the world apart to claim her. A twig snapped somewhere beyond the ridge. Kyle slowly lifted his head. Golden eyes burned through the falling snow. Then another pair appeared, and another. Shadows began stepping out from the trees. 30 wolves, maybe more. Their breath steamed in the frozen air as they formed a loose circle around the Alpha King. None of them bowed. Kyle's aura darkened instantly. A deep growl rolled through his chest. Careful. The single word carried enough dominance to shake the snow from nearby branches. Several wolves flinched, but their leader stepped forward anyway. A tall grey wolf shifted smoothly into human form, scarred, broad-shouldered, and arrogant enough to stare directly at Kyle. "Alpha King," the man said calmly, "your presence here is unexpected." Kyle's gaze sharpened. "Then you came unprepared." The man's eyes slid toward the woman in Kyle's arms. Greed flashed there instantly. "There are rumors," he said slowly, "of a wolf carrying ancient blood." Kyle's grip tightened protectively. His wolf bared its teeth inside his mind. "Mine," the rival Alpha continued. "Our packs have searched for years for the Moon Queen heir." The surrounding wolves shifted eagerly. Some stepped closer. Kyle's aura exploded outward like thunder. Snow blasted across the ridge as dominance crushed the air. Every wolf froze instantly, including their leader. "Another step," Kyle said quietly, "and I will remind you why kings are not challenged." Silence stretched across the frozen valley, but then the woman in Kyle's arms suddenly shivered. Her body trembled violently. Silver light flickered again beneath her skin. Kyle's breath caught. Her lashes fluttered weakly. The rival Alpha noticed immediately. His smile widened slowly. "Well," he murmured, "it seems the legend is real." Kyle felt something ancient rise inside his chest. Something far darker than anger. Possession. He lowered his head beside the woman's ear. "Stay with me," he whispered. His wolf pressed closer to her fading life force. Then her eyes opened. Barely. Moonlight silver. And for one fragile second she looked directly at him. Recognition flickered there, followed by fear. Her voice trembled against the storm. "You shouldn't have come." Kyle frowned. Before he could answer, her power erupted. Silver light exploded across the ridge. The snow lifted from the ground in a swirling storm of glowing frost. Every wolf staggered backward. The rival Alpha cursed. "Grab her!" Several wolves lunged forward. Kyle moved faster. His aura detonated across the ridge with devastating force. Dominance crashed through the valley like a tidal wave. Half the attackers collapsed instantly. The rest struggled to stay standing. Kyle's voice dropped into something primal, ancient, terrifying. "She is mine." The declaration shook the mountains. Even the rival Alpha staggered back, but Kyle's attention remained locked on the woman in his arms. Because her silver eyes had widened in horror, and her power was still rising. Uncontrolled, wild. Ancient Moon Queen magic surged through her body like a breaking dam. The ground beneath them cracked. Snow began lifting into the air. And Kyle realized something dangerous. His mate wasn't just awakening, she was losing control. If her power fully erupted, it could destroy the entire valley, including her. Then she whispered something that chilled him deeper than the storm. "I can't stop it." Chapter 4. The power that should have stayed buried. Silver light spiraled through the storm like a living thing. Snow lifted from the ground, spinning around the ridge in a glowing cyclone. The rival wolves staggered back in alarm. Kyle tightened his hold on the woman as the ground beneath them trembled with ancient power. Her body shook violently against his chest. Cold one moment, burning the next. The Moon Queen blood inside her had awakened too fast, too violently, too dangerously. Her silver eyes widened in panic. "I can't hold it." The words barely escaped her lips. Kyle felt the truth instantly. Her power was raw, untamed, Ancient magic surged through her veins with the force of a breaking storm, and if it erupted fully, it would tear her apart. His wolf snarled in fury. Mine. Kyle pressed his forehead against hers, grounding himself in the fragile rhythm of her breath. You won't face it alone. The bond pulsed faintly between them. Unclaimed, unmarked, yet undeniable. Silver light flickered again beneath her skin. The rival alpha stepped forward slowly through the storm of frost. Greed burned in his eyes now. The Moon Queen, he said softly, alive after all these centuries. Kyle lifted his gaze. Danger flashed instantly in the air. The rival alpha smiled wider. You cannot protect her alone, King. More wolves began moving through the trees behind him. Reinforcements. Entire packs had followed the scent of power. Kyle's aura darkened like a gathering storm. You mistake survival for negotiation. The rival alpha chuckled. No. He gestured toward the trembling woman in Kyle's arms. I see opportunity. Several wolves shifted into their true forms, massive bodies, sharp fangs, predatory hunger. Kyle's wolf rose instantly, but the woman suddenly gasped. Her power surged again, stronger this time. The snowstorm exploded outward across the ridge. Every wolf staggered backward. Even Kyle braced his stance. Her silver eyes burned bright. Pain twisted across her face. I can hear them. Kyle frowned. Who? Her voice trembled. The wolves. Her fingers tightened weakly against his cloak. All of them. Understanding hit him instantly. Moon Queen blood carried an ancient ability. Dominion. The power to command every wolf in the valley, but only if the air survived the awakening. Her body arched suddenly as another surge tore through her. Kyle caught her instantly. His voice dropped into a deep command. Listen to me. Her silver eyes struggled to focus on him. The bond between them pulsed again, fate pulling tighter. You are stronger than the storm. He placed his hand gently over her heart. His wolf pushed its presence forward through the fragile bond. Warmth, stability, a shield. Her breathing slowed slightly. The storm above the ridge flickered uncertainly. For a moment, her power hesitated. Then the rival alpha lunged. His claws slashed toward her. Kyle moved like lightning. His fist crashed into the attacker's jaw with brutal force. The alpha slammed into the snow several meters away. Kyle rose slowly. The woman remained cradled in one arm. The rescued pup tucked safely inside his cloak. His golden eyes burned with lethal authority. Every wolf froze instantly, because the Alpha King was done waiting. Dominance exploded from him like a thunderclap. The air itself seemed to bend beneath his power. Leave. The single word carried ancient command. Half the wolves dropped to their knees instinctively, but the rival Alpha struggled back to his feet. Blood stained his lip. You cannot scare every pack away, he growled. They will come for her. Kyle's gaze turned colder than the storm. Let them. Then he bent his head beside the woman's ear and whispered a vow meant only for her. I will burn the world before I lose you. Her silver eyes widened weakly. For the first time, something softer flickered there, hope. But before either of them could move, a horn echoed through the valley. Long, deep, ancient. Every wolf on the ridge froze instantly. Fear spread across their faces. Even the rival Alpha stiffened. Kyle recognized the sound immediately, the High Council of Alphas, which meant something far worse than pack greed had just arrived. And if the council discovered the Moon Queen heir first, they wouldn't hunt her, they would own her. Chapter 5. The Council That Hunts Queens. The horn echoed again, long, ancient, unmistakable. Every wolf on the ridge lowered their head instinctively, fear spreading through the pack like a cold wind. Kyle's expression hardened. Only one authority in the werewolf world used that horn. The High Council of Alphas, the rulers above every pack, the judges who decided which bloodlines survived and which were erased. Snow drifted through the silence as Kyle slowly lifted his head toward the forest. His wolf was already pacing restlessly beneath his skin. Because the council never arrived without purpose, and tonight they had come hunting. The rival Alpha backed away a step, his arrogance fading quickly. "This just became bigger than either of us," he muttered. Kyle didn't answer. His attention remained fixed on the woman in his arms. Her breathing had grown shallow again. Silver light still flickered weakly beneath her skin. Unstable, uncontrolled, her awakening had barely begun. If the council discovered her now, she wouldn't survive it. Her lashes fluttered faintly. Moon-silver eyes struggled open. The storm around them softened slightly as her power wavered. "You should leave," she whispered. Her voice trembled with exhaustion. Kyle frowned. "And abandon you?" A faint, bitter smile touched her frozen lips. "That would be safer." His wolf growled instantly. Possession surged through his chest like wildfire. "There is no version of this world where I walk away from my mate." Her eyes widened faintly. The word hung between them like fragile truth. Mate. The bond pulsed again, weak, yet undeniable. For a moment her gaze softened. Then the forest erupted with movement. Dark figures stepped through the snow like shadows claiming the ridge. 5 wolves, all enormous, all carrying the same ancient scent of authority. Council Alphas. They shifted into human form as they approached. Each one radiated dominance powerful enough to make lesser wolves collapse. But Kyle didn't move. The leader stepped forward slowly, tall, cold-eyed. A silver chain rested across his shoulders, the mark of council command. His gaze settled on Kyle first. "Alpha King Draven." His voice carried calm authority. "You traveled far from your territory." Kyle's reply came just as cold. "I was not aware my movements required permission." The council leader's eyes drifted to the woman in Kyle's arms. Interest sharpened instantly. "Well," he murmured, "now we understand." The rival Alpha bowed quickly. "Council elders, we discovered her moments ago." His eyes gleamed with ambition. The Moon Queen heir. A ripple of tension spread across the ridge. Even the wind seemed to hesitate. The council leader stepped closer, slow, careful, predatory. Silver light flickered across the woman's skin again. His expression darkened. So the ancient bloodline survived after all. Kyle's aura surged instantly. A warning. "Stop!" The single word carried enough dominance to crack the snow beneath their feet. The council leader paused. Amusement touched his lips. "You would challenge the council? Over a woman?" Kyle's gaze burned like wildfire. "Over my mate?" Silence crashed across the ridge. The other council alphas exchanged glances, because claiming a mate in front of the council was more than declaration. It was a political war. The leader tilted his head slightly. "How unfortunate." His eyes returned to the weakened woman. "You see, Alpha King, the Moon Queen bloodline was erased for a reason." Kyle's jaw tightened. Ancient history stirred at the edge of memory. The Great Pack War, the rebellion that nearly destroyed werewolf civilization. The woman stirred weakly in his arms. Fear flashed across her silver eyes. "They'll cage me," she whispered. Kyle's grip tightened protectively. "Over my dead body." The council leader sighed softly. "That can certainly be arranged." The air shifted instantly. Power rolled across the ridge like thunder. Council dominance pressed downward from all sides. 5 alphas, ancient, ruthless, united. Even Kyle felt the pressure. But his wolf rose stronger, protective, furious. The leader extended a hand calmly. "Hand her over." Kyle didn't move. Snow drifted silently between them. Then he spoke, slow, final, "No." The council alphas shifted instantly, claws extending, power gathering. The rival wolves retreated quickly from the coming clash. Because everyone on the ridge understood the truth now. The Alpha King had just declared war on the council, and he was holding the one woman powerful enough to change the entire world. Then the woman gasped suddenly. Her body arched against Kyle's chest. Silver light exploded across the ridge again, stronger, wild. Ancient Moon Queen magic surged outward like a shockwave. Every wolf staggered back. Even the council alphas froze in stunned disbelief. Kyle stared down at her, because her silver eyes had fully awakened now, bright, terrifying, and filled with a power that hadn't walked the earth in centuries. Her voice trembled with realization. "They're coming," Kyle frowned. "Who?" Her gaze lifted slowly toward the mountains beyond the valley. Fear filled her expression. "The wolves who killed my pack." Chapter 6. The Wolves Who Slaughter Queens. The ridge trembled under the surge of her awakening. Silver power spiraled around Kyle and the woman in his arms, lifting snow into a glowing storm that stung the eyes of every wolf present. The council alphas stepped back instinctively. Ancient instinct warned them that the force rising from her blood was older than their authority. The woman gasped softly, fingers tightening weakly against Kyle's cloak. "They're close." Her voice shook with something deeper than fear. Memory. Kyle studied her face, sensing the storm of visions racing through her mind. "Who are they?" Her silver eyes lifted slowly toward the distant mountains. "The ones who burned my home." A ripple of tension moved through the gathered wolves. The rival alpha frowned. "That pack was destroyed years ago." Her lips parted. They made sure no one believed the truth. Kyle's wolf snarled inside his chest. He had seen enough lies in pack politics to recognize the pattern. Erased bloodlines, hidden massacres. The Moon Queen lineage had not simply vanished. It had been hunted. The council leader spoke again, voice measured and cold. "You speak dangerous accusations." Kyle's gaze snapped toward him. "Let her finish." The woman swallowed, struggling to stay conscious. Snowflakes melted against the silver glow warming her skin. They called themselves the Iron Fang. A murmur spread across the ridge. Even the council alphas stiffened slightly, because every wolf in the north knew that name. Iron Fang was not a pack, it was a secret order. Elite hunters raised to eliminate wolves considered too powerful to control. Kyle felt fury coil slowly through his chest. And they wiped out the Moon Queen bloodline. Her breathing grew shallow again. They thought they did. The council leader studied her with narrowed eyes. If Iron Fang is active again, this situation becomes far more complicated. Kyle let out a low, dangerous laugh. His golden eyes darkened. "But my priority remains the same." The leader's gaze sharpened. "The girl?" Kyle lowered his head beside her ear. "My mate." The word carried final authority. The council alphas exchanged quiet glances. A claimed mate was protected under ancient law, but Moon Queen blood changed the rules. Power like hers reshaped the balance of the entire werewolf world. The leader folded his arms slowly. "Then understand the danger you've chosen, King." His voice softened. "Iron Fang does not hunt with ordinary wolves." As if summoned by the warning, a distant howl cut through the storm, low, metallic, wrong. The woman in Kyle's arms froze. Terror flashed across her face. "That's them!" Another howl answered from deeper in the forest. Then another. The rival alpha backed away quickly. "I'm not dying in someone else's war." His wolves retreated toward the trees. Even the council alphas grew tense. Iron Fang hunters were legendary for one thing. They never stopped. Kyle adjusted his grip on the woman, pulling her closer against his chest. Her warmth had begun returning slowly, but exhaustion still weighed heavily on her body. His wolf whispered again, "Mine." Kyle turned toward the dark forest path leading out of the valley. "We leave now." The council leader raised an eyebrow. "You think you can outrun Iron Fang?" Kyle's lips curved faintly. "I don't need to outrun them." His gaze sharpened toward the approaching howls. I only need to reach my territory first. The leader's expression shifted slightly, because everyone understood what that meant. Kyle's kingdom held the largest wolf army in the Northern Territories, and the Iron Fang hunters had just entered his domain. The woman stirred faintly in his arms. You're risking everything. Kyle looked down at her. The storm reflected inside her silver eyes. I already decided. His voice softened, but the power behind it remained unshaken. You are worth the war. Her breath caught quietly. For a moment, silence wrapped around them. Then the forest erupted. Massive wolves burst through the trees, black fur, steel collars, eyes glowing with unnatural red light. Iron Fang. Their leader stepped forward slowly, a towering wolf whose scars spoke of countless battles. When he shifted into human form, his gaze locked directly onto the woman. Recognition flashed instantly. There she is. The hunter smiled coldly. The last Moon Queen. Kyle stepped forward before anyone else could react. Dominance exploded outward with the force of a mountain breaking. Snow blasted across the ridge. Every wolf felt it. The authority of a true alpha king. She is under my protection. The hunter's smile widened. We've killed kings before. Kyle's eyes gleamed dangerously. Then tonight you'll learn the difference between a king and a mate. The hunter's gaze flickered toward the woman again, and then he gave a quiet command. Take her. Dozens of Iron Fang wolves surged forward. Kyle's wolf roared inside his mind. The bond between him and the woman flared suddenly. Silver light erupted again. But this time the power didn't explode outward. It flowed directly into Kyle. Strength, speed, ancient magic flooding through the mate bond. The hunter's eyes widened in shock, because Moon Queen power had just chosen its protector. Kyle stepped forward into the charging wolves, golden eyes blazing, and for the first time in centuries, a Moon Queen fought beside her Alpha King. Chapter 7. The Mate Bond That Breaks Armies. The Iron Fang wolves surged forward like a black tide. Snow shattered beneath their paws as red eyes locked onto the woman in Kyle's arms, every hunter driven by the same ancient command. Kill the queen. Kyle stepped into their path without hesitation. Golden dominance erupted from him in a violent wave, his wolf roaring beneath his skin as power rolled across the ridge like thunder. Several Iron Fang wolves faltered mid-charge, but the hunters kept coming. They had been trained for one purpose, to kill creatures stronger than themselves. The woman gasped softly as Kyle lowered her carefully against a fallen pine, his cloak wrapped tightly around her shoulders. Cold air bit her skin again, yet the silver light within her pulsed stronger now, alive, awake. Her fingers curled weakly against the snow as she watched the Alpha King step away from her. Straight into battle, the first hunter lunged. Kyle moved like a blade through the storm. His fist crashed into the attacker's jaw with brutal force, sending the wolf skidding across the ice before it could even shift forms. Another wolf leapt for his throat. Kyle twisted, claws flashing as his wolf surfaced beneath human skin. Blood stained the snow. The Iron Fang leader watched calmly from the ridge. Impressive. His voice carried across the battlefield, but kings still bleed. 3 hunters attacked Kyle at once. Steel claws slashed through the air. Kyle dodged the first strike and broke the second wolf's arm with a vicious counterblow. But the third hunter landed a blow across his ribs. Blood spread across the snow. The woman's breath caught sharply. Fear crashed through her chest. Something ancient answered that fear. The silver light inside her flared violently. Across the battlefield, Kyle felt the change instantly. The mate bond ignited between them like lightning. Power poured through it. Not wild this time. Focused. Protective. Kyle's body surged with renewed strength. His wounds closed halfway before the hunter's eyes. The Iron Fang leader stiffened. Impossible. The woman struggled to her knees in the snow, trembling but determined. Silver wind spiraled around her as the bond poured power toward Kyle. "I won't let you die," her whisper carried across the battlefield like a vow. Kyle looked back at her for one brief second, and something in his expression changed. Pride. The next hunter charged. Kyle caught him mid-air, then slammed the wolf into the ground with enough force to crack the frozen earth. The remaining Iron Fang wolves hesitated, because the Alpha King was no longer fighting alone. Moon Queen power burned through his veins, golden dominance mixed with silver magic, ancient king and ancient queen, fighting together for the first time in centuries. The Council Alphas watched from the ridge in stunned silence. Even their leader frowned now. That bond. Another Council Elder spoke quietly. "It's stabilizing her awakening." The leader's eyes darkened. "If she survives this night," he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to, because a living Moon Queen would change the balance of power forever. Below them, Kyle moved through the hunters like a storm. 2 wolves lunged at once. He broke one's throat and threw the other into a tree before it could even recover. The Iron Fang leader stepped forward slowly. Enough amusement, enough testing. His body shifted mid-stride, bones cracked, muscle tore. Within seconds, a monstrous black wolf stood where the man had been, larger than any normal wolf, scarred from dozens of ancient battles. The hunters retreated instantly, because their commander had decided to finish this himself. The beast stalked forward across the snow, red eyes fixed on the woman. She dies first. Kyle stepped between them. Golden eyes burned like wildfire. "You'll have to go through me." The Iron Fang wolf smiled, then lunged. The impact shook the ridge. Claws and teeth collided as the 2 alphas crashed through the snow in a violent blur of power. The woman staggered to her feet. Her silver aura flickered wildly around her. Pain twisted through her chest as the bonds stretched under the strain of battle. Kyle slammed the hunter backward into the ice, but the Iron Fang wolf was just as strong. They tore across the battlefield in a storm of claws. Then the hunter twisted suddenly, breaking free. His body lunged straight past Kyle, straight toward the woman. Her eyes widened in shock. The massive wolf was already mid-air. Too fast, too close, Kyle roared, but he was too far away. The hunter's jaws opened. Then the woman raised her trembling hand. Silver light exploded outward. The entire ridge froze. Ice erupted from the ground in a blinding wave of ancient magic. The Iron Fang wolf slammed directly into the barrier of frozen power, and for the first time, the Moon Queen stood fully awake. Snow spiraled around her glowing figure, silver eyes blazing. Every wolf on the ridge stared in stunned silence, because the power they had hunted for centuries had finally returned. Then the woman whispered something that made even the Council Alphas go still. "I remember now." Her gaze lifted slowly toward the Iron Fang leader trapped in ice. "You were there the night my mother died." Chapter 8. The night the Moon Queen was betrayed. The ridge fell silent beneath the glow of silver power. Lyra Vale stood trembling in the storm, frost swirling around her like a living crown as ancient magic pulsed through her awakened blood. Across the frozen ground, the Iron Fang leader remained trapped inside the jagged prison of ice she had summoned. His red eyes burned with furious recognition. "You survived." Lyra's chest rose slowly as memories tore through her mind like lightning. The burning halls, the screams of wolves dying in the night, the smell of blood and smoke choking the forest, and the man standing beside the Iron Fang hunters while her pack burned. Her silver gaze shifted slowly toward the ridge where the Council Alphas watched. "Tell them the truth," she whispered. The trapped hunter laughed softly. "You remember everything now, don't you?" Kyle Draven stepped beside Lyra instantly, his body shielding her as his golden eyes scanned every wolf on the ridge. His wolf was no longer merely protective. It was territorial, possessive, deadly. You will speak carefully, Kyle warned. The Iron Fang leader grinned through the frost. You want truth, Alpha King? His gaze flickered toward the council. Then ask them why the Moon Queen bloodline was truly erased. A ripple of unease passed through the gathered wolves. Even the council leader's expression hardened slightly. Lyra's fingers curled slowly at her sides. My mother begged for peace. Her voice shook with rising fury. She tried to unite the packs. The hunter nodded. And that was the problem. Silver light flickered violently across Lyra's skin as the full memory surged forward. The council feared her power, she said quietly. They feared she could command every wolf alive. The Iron Fang leader tilted his head toward the council ridge. So they gave the order. Silence exploded across the battlefield. Every wolf turned toward the 5 council alphas. The leader's eyes narrowed coldly. That accusation borders on treason. Kyle's voice cut through the air like steel. Answer it. The council leader studied him carefully. You are letting emotion cloud your judgment, King Draven. Kyle stepped forward one slow step. Dominance rolled across the ridge like a gathering storm. My mate was hunted. Another step. Her pack slaughtered. Another. And someone signed the order. The snow beneath Kyle's boots cracked under the weight of his aura. I will hear the truth tonight. For a long moment the council leader said nothing. Then one of the other council alphas shifted uneasily. The Iron Fang operation was authorized. Gasps rippled through the surrounding wolves. Lyra felt the ground tilt beneath her feet. You killed them all. Her voice broke quietly. The alpha avoided her gaze. The Moon Queen bloodline destabilized the balance of power. Kyle's golden eyes darkened with rage. You murdered children to protect your thrones. The council leader's expression turned cold. We preserved order. Lyra's silver power flared violently again. The ice prison around the Iron Fang leader cracked wider. You burned my home. Snow lifted from the ground as the Moon Queen's aura rose like a storm. Kyle felt the bond pulse sharply between them. Her anger was feeding the awakening, feeding her strength. But it was also tearing her apart. He stepped closer beside her. Lyra, her breathing shook. They killed my mother. Kyle lowered his voice, grounding the storm through the bond. And tonight they learned the cost. Across the ridge, the council leader's patience finally snapped. This spectacle ends now. He raised his hand. Council dominance surged outward in a crushing wave meant to force submission. Several wolves dropped instantly to their knees, but Kyle did not move. His golden aura surged upward to meet it. Alpha King against council authority. The air itself seemed to fracture between them. Lyra lifted her head slowly. Silver eyes blazing. You taught the world to fear Moon Queens. Her voice echoed with ancient power. So let them remember why. The ice prison shattered. The Iron Fang leader dropped heavily to the ground. But he didn't attack. Instead, he bowed his head toward Lyra. Not in submission. In respect. Your mother would be proud. Lyra stared at him in shock. You obeyed them, she whispered. The hunter looked toward the council. We obeyed the contract. Then his gaze returned to her. But Iron Fang remembers the old laws. He slowly stepped backward into the shadows. The hunters will not interfere tonight. The council leader's eyes flashed with fury. You dare defy the council? The Iron Fang wolf only smiled. Tonight belongs to the queen. Then he vanished into the storm with the remaining hunters, leaving the battlefield suddenly dangerously quiet. Kyle turned slowly toward the 5 council alphas. His voice carried across the ridge with terrifying calm. You ordered the slaughter of her bloodline. The council leader's lips thinned. And I would do it again. Kyle's wolf rose fully inside him. Dominance shook the mountains. Then tonight you answer for it. Beside him, Lyra's silver aura expanded across the snow like rising moonlight. For the first time since her awakening, her power moved with purpose, control, ancient authority flowing through her veins. The wolves watching the battle began lowering their heads instinctively, because something deeper than dominance had just appeared. Royal command. Lyra's voice carried softly through the storm. Kael. He turned to her instantly. Her silver eyes met his. The bond between them pulsed like a living flame. I remember what my mother told me before she died. Kael's chest tightened. What did she say? Lyra's gaze lifted toward the council, and her voice became something far older than fear. She said the Moon Queen would rise again. Silver light exploded across the valley, and the wolves who betrayed her would kneel. Chapter 9. The bond that shouldn't exist. The first snow fell as they reached the edge of the Frostvale Valley, thin white flakes drifting through the dark pines like silent warnings. Lyra walked ahead of the pack, with the rescued pup wrapped in her cloak, each step slow but stubborn, her body still fragile from the storm that nearly claimed her life. The cold wind pressed against her ribs, but something warmer pulsed beneath her skin now. An unfamiliar heat coiled around her wolf like a sleeping serpent. Kael followed a few steps behind, his sharp gaze fixed on her shoulders. On the strange way the air around her seemed to shift when she breathed. Every instinct in him screamed that something ancient had awakened the night he found her dying in the snow. The pup in Lyra's arms stirred weakly, pressing its small nose against her throat, as if drawn to the warmth beneath her skin. She swallowed hard, a sudden ache tightening her chest as the wolflet scent mixed with another, one far stronger. Kael's presence brushed against her senses like distant thunder, deep and magnetic, a pull that tightened every time he stepped closer. She told herself it meant nothing. She told herself the Alpha, King, simply protected anyone who saved one of his pack. Yet every time his gaze touched her, something in her chest answered like a silent heartbeat that wasn't her own. They reached the old stone ridge where Frostvale territory began, the border carved centuries ago when the northern packs first divided their lands. Kael raised one hand and the wolves behind them halted instantly, disciplined and silent. The wind shifted, carrying scents from the forest beyond the ridge. His expression hardened as his wolf rose beneath the surface of his skin, sharp and alert. Danger lived in the air tonight. Stay behind me, he said quietly. Lyra's spine stiffened. I am not fragile. Kael's eyes flashed with something fierce, something deeper than simple irritation. You almost froze to death 2 nights ago, and yet I am still standing. For a moment, neither moved. The tension between them stretched tight as drawn wire, thick with unspoken things neither of them understood yet. Then Kael turned away sharply, his jaw tight. The moment broke, but the strange pulse between them did not. A sudden howl shattered the silence. Every wolf behind them stiffened instantly. The sound came from the trees ahead. Rogues! Kael stepped forward without hesitation, his dominance rolling across the ridge like thunder. The wolves of Frostvale shifted positions instantly, forming a silent defensive ring around Lyra and the pup. Snow whispered against the ground as dark shapes moved between the trees, eyes gleaming through the storm. Lyra's breath caught. There were too many. The rogues emerged slowly, their movements lean and predatory, fur ragged from hunger and exile. At their center stood a tall grey wolf, with scarred shoulders and pale yellow eyes burning with challenge. He shifted partially into human form, revealing a cruel smile. Well, the rogue leader said softly. The great Alpha King himself. Kael's voice dropped to a low growl. Leave, the rogue laughed, and walk away from a wounded prize. His gaze slid to Lyra. That girl smells interesting. Lyra's pulse slammed in her ears. Kyle moved before she could react. His wolf exploded forward in a blur of silver and black, slamming the rogue leader into the snow with terrifying speed. The forest erupted in chaos as wolves collided in snapping jaws and flashing claws. Snow sprayed into the air while growls and snarls ripped through the valley. Lyra backed toward the ridge, clutching the pup tighter as two rogues lunged toward her through the storm. Fear hit first, then something else followed. The same strange heat surged inside her chest again. The first rogue leapt. Lyra raised one hand instinctively. The world cracked. A burst of white-blue light erupted from her palm, slamming the attacking wolf backward as if struck by lightning. The rogue hit the ground hard, skidding across the snow with a stunned yelp. Silence exploded across the battlefield. Every wolf froze. Kyle turned sharply, his golden eyes blazing with shock. Lyra stared at her own hand, breath shaking. The light had vanished, leaving only the faintest glow beneath her skin like dying embers. The rogue leader slowly pushed himself up from the snow, his eyes wide with sudden understanding. "Well," he whispered hoarsely, "that explains everything." Lyra's heart hammered. "Explains what?" The rogue leader's smile turned sharp and hungry. "You truly don't know." Kyle's growl shook the forest. "Speak carefully." The rogue's eyes flicked between them, realization spreading across his face like wildfire. "She carries the blood of the Moon Sovereign." The words struck the valley like thunder. Every wolf behind Kyle shifted uneasily. Lyra felt the ground tilt beneath her feet. "That's impossible," Kyle said coldly, but the rogue only laughed softly. "Impossible?" His gaze dropped to Lyra's glowing hand. "Then explain the storm power she just unleashed." Lyra's breath caught in her throat. Moon sovereigns were not legends told lightly among the northern packs. They were rulers of ancient wolves, beings whose power shaped storms. Kyle turned slowly toward Lyra, his expression unreadable but burning with something dangerously intense. "You need to tell me the truth," he said quietly. Lyra shook her head weakly. "I don't know what he's talking about," but the warmth beneath her skin pulsed again, stronger this time. The rogue leader's smile widened. "And there's something else, Alpha King." Kyle's eyes snapped back to him. The rogue's voice dropped to a whisper filled with dangerous amusement. "You may want to check your bond." Kyle went perfectly still. The air between him and Lyra tightened like a drawn blade. Slowly, very slowly, Kyle reached toward the faint mark hidden beneath Lyra's collarbone. The moment his fingers brushed her skin, pain exploded through both of them. A glowing silver symbol flared to life across Lyra's chest, and the same mark ignited across Kyle's heart. The forest fell silent. The rogue leader's laugh echoed through the snow. "Well," he said softly, "it seems the Alpha King just discovered his mate." Lyra's knees nearly buckled. Kyle stared at the blazing mark on his chest in stunned disbelief, because one truth burned brighter than the storm swirling in Lyra's veins. The Moon Sovereign bloodline had not appeared in 500 years. And now, the Alpha King of Frostvale was bonded to the last one. Chapter 10. The Mate Bond That Could Ignite a War. The glowing symbol burned across Lyra's collarbone like living moonfire, its silver light spilling across the snow while the same mark pulsed violently beneath Kyle's skin. For one suspended heartbeat, the entire forest stood frozen, wolves and rogues alike staring at the impossible truth now blazing between them. Lyra's breath came in ragged bursts as the heat beneath her ribs surged wildly, the strange power in her blood answering the mark with fierce hunger. She had no language for what she felt, only the terrifying certainty that something ancient had just recognized her and claimed her. Kyle stood a few steps away, utterly still. the stormlight reflecting in his golden eyes while the bond carved through his instincts like lightning splitting a mountain. The rogue leader was the first to break the silence, his laugh low and sharp as it drifted across the clearing. The Alpha King of Frostvale, bound to a moon sovereign. His voice carried easily through the cold air, thick with dangerous amusement. "Do you understand what that means?" Kyle's wolf surged beneath his skin, raw dominance rolling outward until even the wind seemed to recoil from him. The rogue's grin faltered for a brief second under the crushing pressure, though his yellow eyes gleamed with something darker. "Every pack in the north will want her," he continued softly. "Power like that decides kingdoms." The words struck the clearing harder than claws. Lyra felt the truth settle like ice inside her chest. Kyle stepped forward slowly, placing himself between Lyra and the rogues with instinctive certainty. His presence rose like a wall of iron, unshakable and absolute. "No one touches her," he said quietly. The calm in his voice held far more threat than a shout. Behind him, the wolves of Frostvale shifted uneasily, their instincts recognizing that something far larger than a rogue skirmish had just begun. The rogue leader tilted his head thoughtfully, studying Kyle with predatory curiosity. "You think the other alphas will accept this?" he asked. "A hidden moon sovereign appearing in your territory, bound to you before the council even hears her name?" His smile returned slowly. "They will call it theft." A ripple of tension moved through the Frostvale wolves. The northern packs were bound by fragile agreements, ancient laws meant to prevent one alpha from gathering too much power. A moon sovereign was more than power. It was a crown. Kyle's voice remained steady. "Leave my territory." The command rolled through the valley like distant thunder. For a moment, the rogue seemed ready to argue again, but Kyle's wolf pressed harder against the surface, a flash of silver authority that silenced the forest itself. The rogue leader studied him for a long moment before stepping backward into the drifting snow, raising his hands in mock surrender. "Very well, Alpha King," he said with a thin smile. "But the moment this spreads beyond Frostvale," his gaze slid toward Lyra, "every alpha in the north will start hunting your mate." Then the rogues vanished into the trees. The clearing fell silent again, broken only by the whisper of snow drifting through the dark pines. Lyra's legs trembled as the adrenaline slowly faded, the small pup still pressed weakly against her chest. Kyle turned toward her, his expression unreadable but fierce with unspoken thoughts. The glowing mark along her collarbone had dimmed now, though the strange warmth beneath her skin still pulsed restlessly. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The bond between them felt alive. "You should hate this," Lyra whispered finally, her voice rough from the cold and the weight of everything that had just changed. "You barely know me." Kyle's gaze softened for the briefest instant before his jaw tightened again. "The bond doesn't ask permission," he replied quietly, "and it doesn't care how inconvenient it is." His hand lifted slowly, stopping just short of touching her again, as if he feared what the contact might unleash. "But there is one truth you need to understand now." Lyra swallowed, her heart pounding painfully. Kyle's voice lowered into something that sounded very close to a vow. "You are mine to protect." The words settled between them like iron. Then a howl echoed across the distant mountains. Another answered it, then another. The Frostvale wolves stiffened instantly as the sounds spread through the valley, one signal after another rolling through the night like a chain of distant thunder. Kyle's expression darkened as he listened, the weight of recognition settling heavily across his shoulders. Because those howls did not belong to rogues. They were alpha signals. Lyra felt the bond pulse violently in her chest as the realization struck her. The northern packs already knew, and they were coming. Chapter 11. When the alphas come to claim her. The echo of the alpha howls rolled across the Frostvale Mountains like a gathering storm, each call carrying authority that even the wind seemed to respect. Lyra stood frozen near the stone ridge, the rescued pup trembling softly against her chest, while the strange heat inside her veins pulsed in restless waves. She had never heard signals like that before, yet something ancient within her blood understood their meaning with frightening clarity. Those voices belonged to rulers of distant packs, leaders powerful enough to challenge kings. And they were answering the awakening of something they had thought extinct. Kyle listened in silence, his head tilted slightly as each distant howl reached the valley. The power beneath his skin sharpened with every call, his wolf rising closer to the surface with quiet fury. The Frostvale wolves shifted uneasily behind him, sensing the tension building like thunder trapped beneath the earth. Snow whispered through the trees, but the calm felt fragile now, stretched thin by the knowledge that the mountains themselves had begun to stir. "They're too far to arrive tonight," Kyle said finally, his voice low and steady. "But they will come." Lyra's fingers tightened around the small pup's fur. "To take me?" she asked softly. Kyle turned toward her slowly. His golden eyes held a darkness she had never seen before. Something protective, something dangerous, something that burned with the instinct of a king guarding his claim. "They can try." The quiet certainty in his voice sent a strange shiver through her chest. The bond pulsed again, stronger this time, as if reacting to the promise hidden inside his words. Lyra looked away quickly, struggling to steady the rush of emotions twisting inside her ribs. She had saved wolves from a blizzard 2 nights ago. Now the rulers of the northern packs were crossing mountains because of her, because of what she might be. The Frostvale Beta stepped forward cautiously from the pack behind them, a tall wolf with ash-grey hair and sharp, thoughtful eyes. "Alpha," he said quietly, "if the council hears about this before we do." Kyle's gaze hardened. "They already have." The Beta exhaled slowly, the weight of the situation settling across his shoulders. "Then the council will demand she be brought before them." His eyes shifted briefly toward Lyra. "They will say, 'A moon sovereign cannot belong to one pack.'" The words struck the air like falling stones. Lyra felt the fragile warmth in her chest twist with sudden dread. She had no desire to belong to any pack council, no desire to stand in front of strangers who might decide her fate as if she were a prize or weapon. Kyle's wolf surged beneath his skin again. "She is not theirs to judge," he said quietly. The Beta studied him carefully. "The laws say otherwise." Kyle's eyes flicked toward Lyra, lingering there for a long moment before returning to the valley beyond the ridge. The bond pulsed between them again, subtle yet undeniable, a thread of instinct that neither of them fully understood yet. "The laws were written before moon sovereigns disappeared," Kyle said slowly. "The council has no rule for what happens when one returns." A distant rumble echoed across the mountains, deep and faint like thunder beyond the horizon. The Frostvale wolves stiffened instinctively, their ears tilting toward the sound. Lyra felt it too. Something powerful was moving through the forests beyond their borders. "How many packs are there?" she asked quietly. 7 major alphas in the Northern Territories," Kyle replied. "And all of them will come?" she asked. Kyle did not hesitate. "Yes." The answer settled heavily in the cold air between them. Lyra looked down at the small pup sleeping against her chest, its tiny body warm and fragile against her heart. The world had changed so quickly that her thoughts struggled to keep pace with it. Only days ago she had been a wanderer in the mountains, someone who saved wolves when she found them wounded and moved on before anyone noticed. Now the rulers of entire territories were hunting her, because of the power she didn't understand, because of the bond burning quietly between her and the Alpha King standing beside her. The wind shifted suddenly, carrying a new scent through the valley. Kyle's head snapped up. The beta tensed instantly. "That's not one of ours," he said. A single wolf stepped from the shadows between the trees beyond the ridge, moving with slow, deliberate confidence. His coat was midnight black, streaked with silver scars, his posture tall and commanding even in wolf form. As he crossed into the moonlight, he shifted partially, revealing a broad-shouldered man with sharp, dark eyes and the heavy aura of another alpha. Lyra's breath caught. He had arrived far too quickly. The stranger studied Kyle calmly. Then his gaze shifted to Lyra with unmistakable interest. "So it's true," the Alpha said softly. Kyle's voice dropped to a dangerous growl. "Leave my territory, Rowan." Rowan. The name moved through the Frostvale wolves like a ripple of tension. The rival Alpha smiled faintly as he stepped closer. "I rode through the night when I heard the howls," Rowan replied calmly. "Moon sovereigns tend to attract attention." His gaze lingered on the faint glow still resting against Lyra's collarbone. "Especially when they're bonded." Kyle moved slightly, blocking more of Rowan's view. "You've seen enough." Rowan's expression did not change. "Actually," he said quietly, "I came to make an offer." The forest seemed to lean closer around them. Rowan's eyes returned to Lyra. "A moon sovereign deserves a kingdom worthy of her power," he continued smoothly. "Join my pack, Lyra. I will give you an empire larger than Frostvale has ever commanded." The silence that followed felt sharp as broken ice. Lyra stared at him, stunned. Kyle's wolf erupted forward beneath his skin like a lightning strike. "She is not leaving with you." Rowan's smile deepened slightly. "That isn't your decision alone anymore." The bond between Lyra and Kyle pulsed violently again. The air thickened with alpha dominance. Two kings now stood facing each other across the snow, and Lyra suddenly realized something far more dangerous than the council had begun. The war for her had already started. Chapter 12. The Alpha Who Refused to Let Her Go. Snow drifted slowly between the pines as the two Alpha Kings faced each other across the clearing, the air thick with dominance strong enough to press against the lungs. Rowan stood with calm confidence, his dark eyes fixed on Lyra with open interest, while Kyle remained planted between them like an immovable wall. The bond between Lyra and Kyle pulsed violently in her chest now, reacting to the rising tension as if the ancient force behind it understood what was at stake. Lyra held the small pup close, her heartbeat racing while the strange warmth beneath her skin stirred again, restless and unpredictable. She had never imagined standing between rival kings, yet the moment felt inevitable, as if fate itself had been walking toward this confrontation long before she ever stepped into the storm that nearly killed her. Rowan's voice broke the silence first, calm and measured. "You're delaying the inevitable, Kyle. The council will demand she appear before them." His gaze shifted back to Lyra, curiosity sharpening with every second. "Moon sovereign blood does not belong hidden in the mountains. Her power belongs to the north." The words hung heavy in the cold air, carrying the dangerous logic of ancient pack law. Lyra felt a flicker of anger rise in her chest at the way he spoke about her, like a crown to be claimed or a weapon to be wielded. The warmth inside her ribs flared in response, the buried storm answering her rising emotions. Kyle stepped forward slowly. "She is not an object for your counsel," he said quietly. The calm authority in his voice carried the weight of a king who had fought too many battles to bend easily now. Rowan studied him for a moment before exhaling a faint laugh. "You think this is about power," Rowan said. "It's about balance. Every alpha will demand the same thing once they hear." Lyra finally spoke, her voice steady despite the storm inside her chest. "And what if I refuse?" Both alphas turned toward her. Rowan's expression softened with something almost respectful. Then the council will try to persuade you. His eyes glinted faintly. Or force the issue. The last words barely left his mouth before Kyle's wolf surged forward again, a deep growl rumbling through the clearing like thunder beneath stone. Snow scattered beneath his boots as he took another step closer. No one forces her. The forest went still. For a moment, the only sound was the wind brushing the frozen branches above them. Then Rowan's gaze sharpened. "You would start a war with the council?" Kyle didn't hesitate. "Yes." The single word landed like a blade. Lyra's breath caught in her throat as the meaning of that answer settled across the clearing. The Alpha King of Frostvale had just declared his willingness to stand against every northern pack for her. The bond in her chest pulsed again, stronger, warmer. Something in Lyra shifted. The fear that had followed her since the storm began to loosen its grip, replaced by a fierce clarity she hadn't expected. She looked from Rowan to Kyle, then down at the sleeping pup pressed against her chest. She had saved wolves because it was right, not because anyone commanded it. Her voice came quietly, but it carried through the clearing with surprising strength. "I didn't ask for this power." The faint silver glow flickered again beneath her skin. "But I won't let anyone decide my life either." The air around her trembled. Kyle felt it instantly. So did Rowan. The dormant power inside Lyra surged upward like a rising tide, the storm blood of the Moon Sovereign stirring beneath her control for the first time. Frost crackled across the snow beneath her boots as the energy spilled outward, wild and luminous. Rowan's eyes widened slightly. "So it's true," he murmured. Kyle didn't move. His gaze remained fixed on Lyra with something deeper than awe, something dangerously close to pride. The wind rose suddenly around them, whipping snow through the clearing in spiraling currents as Lyra's power pulsed again. She steadied herself, breathing slowly while the strange energy inside her veins responded to her focus. For the first time since the storm began, the power obeyed her. The wind slowly calmed, the snow settled. Silence returned to the forest. Lyra lifted her head, her gaze steady now. "I will speak to your council," she said. Rowan blinked. Kyle's head turned sharply toward her. "But not as a prisoner," Lyra continued calmly, "and not as something they can claim." Rowan's expression slowly shifted into a thoughtful smile. "That might actually satisfy them," he admitted. Kyle studied her carefully, tension still sharp in his posture. "You don't have to do this." Lyra met his eyes. "I know." The bond between them pulsed softly again, a quiet reminder that whatever path lay ahead, neither of them would walk it alone. Rowan stepped back slightly, the faintest hint of respect now visible in his posture. "Then we ride for the council in 3 days," he said. His gaze lingered on Lyra one last moment before he turned toward the forest. "And when the other alphas see what you've become, the North will never be the same." Rowan disappeared into the trees moments later, leaving only the whisper of snow and distant mountains behind him. The Frostvale wolves slowly relaxed, but Kyle did not move. His gaze remained fixed on Lyra. "You just changed the fate of every pack in the North," he said quietly. Lyra exhaled slowly. "Then I guess we should make sure it's worth it." The bond between them warmed gently in her chest. And for the first time since the storm began, Lyra felt ready to face whatever came next, because one truth had finally become clear. She had never been meant to hide from the storm. She had been born to command it. Chapter 13. The Council of Seven. Alphas. 3 days later, the mountains felt different, as if the land itself held its breath while the rulers of the North gathered. Frostveil wolves travelled in tight formation along the narrow ridge road, their silent discipline surrounding Lyra as Kyle led them through the ancient pass that led to the Council Valley. Snow covered the stone paths carved centuries earlier by the first alphas who forged the fragile peace between packs. Lyra walked beside Kyle, the cold wind brushing her hair while the quiet warmth of the mate bond pulsed steadily beneath her ribs. The rescued pup trotted happily beside her now, stronger after days of rest. Yet every step closer to the council tightened the knot of anticipation inside her chest. The valley appeared beyond the final ridge like a hidden crown of stone. 7 towering pillars circled the clearing, each carved with the sigil of a northern pack, their surfaces worn smooth by centuries of alpha judgment. Wolves already filled the open ground, powerful figures shifting between human and wolf forms as the rulers of distant territories arrived with their guards. The moment Kyle stepped into the clearing, the air shifted with the weight of dominance colliding from every direction. Lyra felt the pressure instantly. 7 different alpha presences pushing against her senses like gathering storms. Rowan stood near the western pillar, arms folded calmly across his chest as if he had been waiting all morning. When he saw Lyra arrive beside Kyle, his sharp eyes brightened with interest rather than surprise. The other alphas turned slowly, their gazes sliding across Lyra with open curiosity and thinly disguised calculation. Some looked skeptical. Others looked wary. One looked furious. The oldest of them stepped forward from the central stone platform, his grey hair tied at the nape of his neck, while the heavy aura of command rolled outward from him. His presence silenced the murmuring wolves around the circle almost instantly. "Alpha Kyle of Frostveil," the elder said. "You arrive with the woman who awakened the Moon Sovereign bloodline." His voice carried across the valley with the weight of law. Kyle stopped at the center of the clearing, Lyra beside him. "Yes." The elder's gaze shifted toward Lyra, sharp and measuring. "You understand why you have been called here." Lyra met his eyes without lowering her chin. "Because you think my power belongs to you." A ripple of surprise moved through the watching wolves. Rowan's mouth curved faintly, clearly entertained by the bold answer. The elder alpha studied her for a long moment before speaking again. "The Moon Sovereign bloodline once ruled the balance between packs," he said calmly. "Such power cannot exist without responsibility to all." Lyra felt the familiar warmth stir beneath her skin. "And what responsibility did your council show when that bloodline vanished?" she asked quietly. The question landed harder than a challenge. Several alphas shifted uncomfortably. Kyle remained silent beside her, his presence steady and unyielding. The elder alpha's gaze sharpened. "You speak boldly for someone who does not yet understand the weight of what she carries." Lyra inhaled slowly. The power beneath her ribs pulsed again. "Then perhaps it's time I showed you." The wind shifted suddenly across the valley. Snow lifted from the ground in faint spirals around her boots, while the silver glow beneath her skin slowly returned, brighter now than it had ever been before. The watching wolves stiffened instantly as the air began to hum with quiet energy. Rowan's eyes widened slightly. One of the younger alphas stepped back. Lyra raised her hand. The storm answered. A pillar of shimmering frost rose from the snow at the center of the clearing, twisting upward like frozen lightning before dissolving again into drifting ice crystals. The wind stilled instantly afterward, leaving stunned silence behind. Lyra lowered her hand slowly. "This power doesn't belong to your council," she said quietly. "It belongs to me." The words echoed softly through the valley. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then one of the younger alphas stepped forward with a scowl twisting his mouth. "This proves nothing," he snapped. "Power alone does not decide leadership. Another alpha nodded slowly in agreement. She could become a threat to us all. The murmuring wolves began again. Lyra felt the tension building across the clearing like gathering thunder. Then Kyle moved. He stepped forward until he stood directly beside her, his voice cutting through the rising noise with calm authority. "She saved 10 wolves during the storm that nearly destroyed my pack," he said. "She froze nearly to death saving a single pup." The clearing quieted slightly. Kyle's gaze swept across the gathered alphas. She did not know her power then. She did not know the bond that would tie her to Frostvale. His voice hardened, but she still chose to protect wolves who were not her responsibility. The elder alpha watched him carefully. "And your point?" Kyle turned toward Lyra. For a single quiet moment their eyes met. The bond between them pulsed warm and steady. Then Kyle did something no one in the valley expected. The Alpha King of Frostvale dropped to one knee. Gasps spread across the circle of wolves as Kyle bowed his head before Lyra, his voice carrying clearly through the stunned silence. "I claim Lyra as my mate." The words echoed through the pillars. His gaze lifted again, fierce and unwavering. "And as the queen who will stand beside me." The silence that followed felt enormous. Rowan stared openly now, stunned for the first time since arriving. The elder alpha's expression shifted slowly into something far more thoughtful. Lyra's heart hammered in her chest as the full weight of what Kyle had done settled over the clearing. He had not just claimed her. He had chosen to kneel before every alpha in the north. The bond between them flared with sudden warmth, bright as moonfire beneath her skin. And in that moment the entire council understood something they had not expected when they summoned her. The Moon Sovereign had not returned alone. Chapter 14. The Queen. The alphas could no longer deny. The silence that followed Kyle's kneeling claim stretched across the council valley like frozen lightning. Wolves stood motionless beneath the towering stone pillars, every gaze fixed on the Alpha King of Frostvale kneeling in the snow before Lyra. The moment carried a weight far older than the council itself. Alphas did not kneel, not to rivals, not to kings. Yet Kyle remained there without hesitation, his head lowered slightly, his presence still radiating the quiet strength of a ruler who feared nothing, not even the judgment of the entire north. Lyra's heart pounded so fiercely she felt it in her throat. The mate bond burned warm beneath her ribs, the silver glow beneath her skin answering his vow with a pulse of living light. She had faced storms, wolves, and death itself in the mountains, yet nothing prepared her for the sight of the most powerful alpha in the north, choosing to bow to her before every rival pack. For a moment she could not move. Then Rowan laughed softly. The sound broke the spell hanging over the clearing. Several alphas turned toward him with irritation, but Rowan only shook his head in quiet disbelief. "Well," he said calmly, "that certainly changes the politics." A ripple of uneasy murmurs passed through the gathered wolves. The younger alpha, who had questioned Lyra's power earlier, stepped forward again, his expression dark with anger. "This is reckless," he snapped. "You kneel to someone the council has not recognized." Kyle rose slowly to his feet. The motion alone silenced the protest. His golden eyes burned with a steady intensity that forced the younger alpha to stop speaking. "I did not kneel for recognition," Kyle said quietly. The words landed like iron across the valley. "I knelt because she is my mate." Lyra felt the bond pulse fiercely again, warmth spreading through her chest, as if the ancient force connecting them had been waiting for that truth to be spoken aloud before witnesses. The silver glow beneath her collarbone brightened once more, drawing the attention of every wolf in the clearing. The elder alpha stepped forward from the central stone platform. His gaze lingered on the fading stormlight around Lyra before turning back to Kyle. "You realize what you have done?" the elder said calmly. "Yes," Kyle replied. The elder studied both of them in silence. The tension in the valley shifted slowly, no longer sharp with challenge but heavy with something more complicated: calculation, curiosity, and reluctant respect. Then the elder Alpha lifted his voice so every wolf could hear. "The Moon Sovereign bloodline has returned," the announcement echoed through the stone pillars like a bell, "and it has chosen its bond." A wave of murmurs spread through the gathered packs. Rowan watched with open interest, clearly enjoying the unfolding chaos. The elder raised one hand, and the noise faded again. "The council cannot command a sovereign," he continued. "History proves that clearly." His gaze moved to Lyra once more. "But the sovereign carries responsibility to the balance of the North." Lyra met his eyes without hesitation. "I never wanted a throne." The elder nodded slowly. "That is often how true rulers begin." The younger Alpha scowled but remained silent now. The elder turned toward the council pillars. "Let it be known that the Moon Sovereign stands beside the Alpha King of Frostvale by her own will." His voice carried clearly through the valley. "And the council will honor that bond." A slow wave of recognition spread through the wolves surrounding the clearing. Some bowed their heads in quiet acceptance. Others watched Lyra with wary respect. Rowan gave a low whistle under his breath. "Well played," he muttered. Lyra felt the tension slowly ease from her shoulders as the reality of the elder's declaration settled in. The council had not claimed her. They had accepted her choice. The wind shifted gently through the valley as Kyle stepped closer to her again. The intensity in his golden eyes had softened now, though the fierce loyalty behind it remained unchanged. "Looks like the North has a new queen," Rowan called from across the clearing. Kyle didn't look at him. His gaze remained locked on Lyra. "You don't have to accept that title," he said quietly. Lyra looked around the valley. The ancient pillars, the watching wolves, the mountains rising beyond the council grounds like silent witnesses to everything that had just changed. Then she looked back at Kyle. The mate bond warmed between them like sunrise after a long night. "I think I already did," she said softly. Kyle's hand lifted slowly, brushing against the mark glowing faintly beneath her collarbone. The touch sent a spark through the bond, a rush of warmth and certainty that made the air itself seem brighter. Lyra didn't pull away. The silver symbol flared once more beneath his fingertips. The bond sealed fully this time. A soft ripple of energy spread across the clearing, subtle but unmistakable. The Moon Sovereign had chosen her king, and the North had just witnessed the birth of a new era. Far above them, the clouds finally began to break, revealing a pale silver moon watching over the mountains. For the first time since the storm began, the future no longer felt like a threat. It felt like destiny. Epilogue: The Queen Who Saved a Pack. Spring returned to the mountain like a quiet promise finally kept. Snow melted from the cliffs in silver streams, and the forest breathed again with the slow pulse of life returning to roots that had slept through the long winter. Lyra stood at the edge of the clearing where the pack gathered, the same place where fear and suspicion once hung in the air like frost. Now the wind carried a different scent: respect, belonging, something deeper than either. The wolves filled the clearing below her, dozens of them, from the youngest pups tumbling through the grass to the scarred warriors who once doubted she would survive her first night among them. Every one of them watched her, and none of them looked away, because Lyra no longer looked like the woman who had been carried half-frozen from the snow with a dying pup clutched to her chest. Power moved through her now like a quiet flame beneath her skin. Her wolf had awakened fully during the long weeks that followed the battle. Slowly at first, then with a strength that stunned even the elders. Silver eyes that caught moonlight like mirrors. Senses sharp enough to hear the breath of every wolf in the clearing. A presence that made even veteran warriors straighten when she passed. Not fear, recognition. The mark at her throat glowed faintly beneath the collar of her cloak. A mark that belonged to the Alpha King. Behind her, Kyle watched the pack as only a ruler could. Still, silent, every instinct alert. Yet when his gaze slid to Lyra, something in the powerful line of his shoulders softened. The savage alpha who had once ruled by fear now carried something heavier. Devotion. He stepped forward, the pack instinctively parting as the Alpha King moved to stand beside the woman who had changed the course of his life and the fate of his wolves. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The wind lifted Lyra's hair as she looked out across the clearing. "So many," she murmured quietly. Kyle's voice was low beside her. "You saved them." Lyra shook her head slowly. "I tried to save one pup, and the pack followed," Kyle said. His hand brushed lightly against hers. The contact sent a quiet pulse through the mate bond. Warm, steady, unbreakable. Months ago that bond had nearly torn them apart before it even formed. Now it felt like the center of the world. Below them, a small wolf pup, older now, stronger, bounded across the clearing and skidded to a stop at Lyra's feet. The same pup she had refused to abandon in the storm. The one who had curled against her chest as the cold tried to claim them both. The pup looked up at her with bright eyes and wagging excitement. Lyra crouched and scratched behind his ears. "You survived," she whispered softly. The pup yipped proudly. Around them, the wolves of the pack began to gather closer, not cautiously, not suspiciously, openly. The elders stood beside the warriors, hunters beside healers. A pack once fractured by distrust now moved together with quiet unity. Because they all knew the truth now. The woman before them had chosen them long before they chose her. She had chosen them when she carried a dying pup through a frozen storm. She had chosen them when she collapsed in the snow rather than leave one behind. And she had chosen them again, when rival alphas came to claim her power. Kyle stepped forward beside her. His voice rolled across the clearing with effortless command. "Look well." The wolves lifted their heads. "Remember who she is." His hand settled firmly at Lyra's back. "She is the woman who saved your pups." A murmur rippled through the pack. "She is the woman who stood against alphas and hunters alike." The murmur deepened. "And she is the mate chosen by the Alpha King." Silence fell like a held breath. Then Kyle did something no alpha in living memory had ever done. He knelt. The movement was slow, deliberate. Every wolf in the clearing froze as the most powerful alpha in the mountain kingdom lowered himself before the woman beside him. His head bowed slightly. Respect, devotion, choice. His voice carried clearly across the clearing. "My queen." The word landed like thunder in the quiet. Lyra stared at him, stunned by the weight of it. "You don't have to—" "I do," Kyle said softly. His golden eyes lifted to meet hers. "Because power is easy," his hand reached for hers. "But choosing someone stronger than yourself," his fingers closed around her palm, "that takes a real alpha." Emotion tightened Lyra's throat. For a moment she couldn't speak. Then she stepped forward and pulled him to his feet. "You are impossible," she whispered. Kyle's mouth curved slightly. "And yet you stayed." Behind them, the pack erupted. Howls rose into the bright sky, long, powerful cries that rolled across the mountain valley. Not the howl of a ruler, not the howl of warriors, the howl of a pack that had finally found something worth protecting. Lyra looked out over them. Every wolf, every life, every heartbeat she had once tried to save. Her wolf stirred beneath her skin, strong and calm. For the first time since that storm, the ache inside her chest felt whole. Kyle's voice brushed her ear. "You changed everything." Lyra leaned lightly against him. "No," she said softly, "we did." Below them, the pup howled again, and this time the entire pack answered.